All right, here we go.
All right, here we go.
What's up, guys? Here we go again.
Here we go. Jeff here at MACkite.
Yeah, I'm Tucker.
We're going to dig deep and dive here into knee and foot position on a board. Some tips and tricks that we've learned because we get to test a lot of different boards, a lot of different pads, a lot of different board shapes. And we had a conversation earlier today about this, about foot placement, knee placement, we got a board here in front of us with a black pad. And how can we kind of pass off some of the things that we've learned just to make your get-ups and when you're up and riding a little quicker as you're doing foot changes and switching your feet, turning, and getting right back into that sweet spot.
Yeah, I think it's important for a few reasons. I mean, just to start at the beginning, if you're a brand new rider and you get to a board and you're like, man, where am I even supposed to sit on this thing, kneel on this thing, stand on this thing? Who freaking knows? And you're watching riders, pro videos that are riding totally different looking things in different places, and their feet are here, and this other guy is riding it with his feet over there. It's hard to figure out, where the starting point is. So I think first and foremost, as a new rider, it's important to realize that where you're kneeling and where you're standing on the board is really important for the ease of use and the performance of the kit, and just making your life a lot happier if you can get sort of at least in the realm of the right area.
Yeah, I think two key things when you're getting up on a board that we're going to kind of talk about is, one, getting the stability you need to get on the board, and then two, get the wing in your hand, and then getting the board speed.
Yep.
Those are things that are very important initially to getting success, to getting up on a board. So with that, knee placement. I'll let you lead into that because you and I get on boards differently, and we'll talk about that.
For sure, yeah, I forgot about that whole discussion.
But
a lot of times I'm kneeling on the board to start, knees facing the direction of the board like this. Mr. Jeff, side saddler.
I do, and then I go to about 45, side and then 45.
So you're 45 on your knees when you're accelerating.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Your feet aren't dragging in the water.
No, I'm 95 when I'm getting up as an outrigger to get myself stable, and then as I get low, then I go more of a 45-degree angle.
Great. So personally, I would advocate most people should start this direction. If your body mechanics just say, dude, I need to start this way, like you just did, do it. But if you don't really care, I would advocate start knees facing the direction of the board. Reason for that, the board is longer in that direction. Your balance front to back is harder than side to side. You can adjust side to side more easily, especially off of your knees, where you don't have your feet giving you that stability, you don't have that leverage in your core. So you're really just moving your head and shoulders around to balance front to back. It's easier to have the length of the board to support you in that. Facing downwind, so the waves are moving under you, pushing you in the direction of the board. That gives you that stability as the waves move up and over, rather than side to side, pitching you all over the place. So that just gives you that directional stability. And then when you go to stand up, whether it's to the right or to the left, you're in a neutral position. So that gives you the same starting point whether you're going to your right or to your left. So that should help with the muscle memory and taking off. Or if you decide, oh, I'm going left, now I'm going to go right, you're already in position to do that. So I think that makes sense. But like I said, sometimes your body mechanics, tell you to do a certain thing a certain way, and that's the way you go with it.
That's where I'm a little odd. I remember the first time I was doing this on the water a few years back, and you're like, what are you doing? And then you watch me do it, and you go, hey, if it works, I guess go for it. Seems like it works just fine for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I initially come on the board with my knees like here, and I use the wing kind of down the water as an outrigger to kind of get my balance. But then I quickly bring it up to feel some lift and power, and as soon as I do that, I shift to a 45-degree angle. Yep. The key for me is, on a board, we're trying to do tips and tricks here, is I got to be kind of centered from front to back so that I get my stability this way, and I have to be careful about my weight. As you already said, there's not much real estate from side to side. I got to have my feet dangled off and my knees just about here so that the board is not bucking me off. Takes some practice, but I do it thousands upon thousands of times. But oftentimes I have reference points on the boards that I use to help me with that. And I'm sure you do too when you get on behind a board where your knees need to be.
So that's the part of similarity is we're both in a specific spot on the board. And a lot of times that has to do with the outline and the length and the shape of the board, but also the distribution of the volume. So most boards have more volume in the back half than they do in the front half. It's not always the case, but if you look at kind of the side profile of the board, where all the meat is, the outline of the board, where all that foam is at, kind of balance that, and that's where your center of buoyancy is going to be. And then, of course, the board itself offers some stability side to side, front to back, so that factors in as well. But generally, you want to be slightly back by, depends on the length of the board, but I would say 2 to 3 inches of the center of buoyancy, because you want the nose up just slightly.
That's the second part, to get speed, efficiency to get moving.
Especially on a smaller board that might be mostly underwater. You're not at the surface gaining that surface stability, you're underwater. And ultimately, when you take off, you want that board to come to the surface.
Yep. And
so you want it pointed towards the surface, otherwise you just stay underwater.
Yep. And I think there are other side saddlers out there, because I've talked to you on the phone. And you've heard me say in videos.
Side Saddlers Anonymous.
I do that too, that's right. But I think what the adjustment is, when I come in from the side, then I quickly do a 45, I start to my weight slides to the back. So then the board does this in the water, because you want the tip up. That's very important for your next piece of getting going in the puzzle, because that's where you start to get board speed.
Yep. And then also, if you are on a bigger board that is already at the surface of the water, when you accelerate, you want that board to keep up. A lot of times the tails of the boards are a little wider, a little flatter. So when you get moving, the front of the board comes off the water. If you're not standing back here and the front of the board comes off the water, now you're pitching the nose down. So usually, that center place where you want to be, that sweet spot, so to speak, is somewhere in the middle of the board, middle of the volume, which is your kind of even buoyancy, but slightly back, like we said, to keep that nose up. And once you plane up, you'll still be in the right spot.
And with that, the tip on that would be, a lot of boards will have holes for your foot straps, and there'll be foot straps here, so you can make, and some boards may even have color here or different spacing, but it's something to notice, because this is not only important for beginners, but even if you've been riding for a long time, like I have, and I've been riding a lot of different boards, when I get on a black space board like this one, it kind of threw me off a little bit. And even though I'm intuitive and know the balance and feel the balance, it kind of threw me off by not having a quick reference, a visual reference when you're out in the water. Because when you're in the water, you got the sun, you got reflection. So I think one of the tips that I'm going to do, if I can't find it or you can't find that reference point on your board, you could do a little wax line or something.
So reference mark is great. Whether it's a wax line, black pad, you could use white out or whatever. If you have a white pad or a different colored pad, you can use permanent marker to give yourself kind of a reference line. Or like Jeff said, a lot of boards have foot straps, so you can know kind of from that foot strap placement, okay, I like my knees, sort of centered over the foot strap location. For the front foot, as is usually a good point of reference for a lot of boards, since that front foot.
Once we're up riding now.
No, I'm talking about for your knees.
Yeah, your knees.
Yeah, so you're on your knees. If you're facing forward, a lot of times the front of your knees are going to kind of line up with that bolt pack. For your straps, I've found. Of course, it depends on the board, but that is generally a really good reference if you don't have any marks on your board already and you haven't found that sweet spot yet. What I would advocate, if you're new to a board, take it for a swim. Doesn't matter if it's windy or not, go balance on it, find that sweet spot. Where do your knees like to be? That's going to make your life a lot easier the first time you go to ride it. To find that kind of nice area, a lot of times when we're testing new boards, that's usually one of the first things I do. Find that sweet spot, adjust my foil to where I want it to be in relation to that sweet spot and where I want to stand on the board, and then from there it's all great, good and gravy. But if those two things aren't really right, you're going to struggle a bit more. And
then as you transition to stand up, obviously a lot of you that have been foiling for a while, you begin to feel, where you need to be. Depending on the foil that you're riding, obviously, will determine, how long the board needs to get board speed to gradually rise up. As you get higher aspect foils, you need more speed and maybe real estate, but more speed to get that up and keep that board flat as you get going. And then finding that balance point. I do like to say, as you progress in your wing foiling experience, typically your feet are not going to migrate further apart, but they're going to migrate closer together. And that would be another video we could do down the road why that is the case. But I do find that as you learn wing foiling, as you get into wing foiling, your feet begin to get closer together.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with the foil you're routing.
Yep.
Smaller, more high aspect, twitchy foils don't want as much leverage thrown at them. They want a more stable flying so that, you know, brings your feet close together. They tend to be a narrower stance, quicker bounce on the pump. You don't need this big huh, 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 so your feet don't need to be out here. That being said, if you really want to rip a hard turn, you might need to drop that foot back, widen your stance a little bit to gain that extra bit of oomph over the foil, extra bit of leverage to really initiate it the way you want it.
Foils
yeah,
are cheap.
general riding, you know, smaller the foil you get, the higher aspect foil you get, your feet are going to move a little closer together, and that frees up your hips a bit more.
Sure does.
Unloads your knees and ankles a bit more, so it's just ergonomically a bit better. But yeah, that's not to say that you won't make them a little wider if you need to rip a hard turn.
No, and foils are making it easier to rip hard turns with not wider stances, I've noticed too lately. Some of these higher surfier foils. But it's just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about foot placement that, you know, generally speaking, you will have some performance benefits with the higher foils, aspect foils, having your feet closer together. Kind of reiterate, you said, less input because you have your weight over your feet, right over your feet, so you have to do less to get the response you want as you're beginning to pump, getting glide, and as you're turning, you know. And a lot of times too with that, when your feet get a little closer, you're a little less, you know, sitting in like you're about ready to sit down to use the bathroom kind of stance, you know. You're getting a little more upright in your stance. And again, when you're more upright, any kind of shifting of your weight is going to transfer directly to that foil. So you're going to be able to have more, feel the input of that foil and feel like you're driving it and responding to it a little quicker versus if you're really wide, you know, it can be a little bit different input points. But anyways, just to say it's something to think about, you know, when you're thinking about your foot placement, you know, they will begin to get a little bit narrower to be able to control the foil with that.
Yeah, and with regard to the reference points, you know, it's not just front to back. You know, when you get to that higher level too, you'll find, okay, cruising, I kind of like to, you know, be right around here in the center and, you know, just mellow. I don't need to fight myself on it. And then, you know, if you're doing some harder turns, especially on a wider foil, you might want to offset your feet a bit more, gain a bit more leverage. And, you know, then you know, okay, you know, when I'm really ripping turns, I like to kind of grip this front edge here with my offside toe. I know my heel is almost to the edge here, and, you know, that's kind of where you're at. So if you're you know, about to bank into a big wave and you want to just give a quick glance down, make sure your feet are sort of kind of in the right area. A lot of times you can sort of feel your way on that and how the foil feels, but you know, you can then drive into that turn, into that wave with some confidence, knowing that, okay, my feet are in the place I remember them being. It's going to react the way that I know it reacts. Whereas if you're a little too far back or, you know, a little too much on the center line, you might go to rip into that turn and just whoop, and your foil doesn't go the way your body does, and that's that. So
I think that's good. This conversation we're having is trying to like make us think about our foot position and the kind of riding we're wanting to doing, wave riding, jetting upwind. I find similar too when I start to get into waves, I do more of an offset. My back foot's going to be closer to the rail. And, you know, and this front foot, again, sometimes like you said, if I'm really trying to make a turn hard, I may slide it back a little further, widen my stance a little bit. But oftentimes when I'm pumping, I find that I am beginning to narrow my stance a little bit more because I'm more efficient with my input, with my weight that I was just talking about. Another thing I've discovered recently, you know, thinking more about foot placement on a board. Obviously when you're jumping, that's a whole different conversation. You're in your straps, you go back here in the center. But what I found when I'm trying to really drive upwind, I'm finding that I'm bringing my feet a little bit more closer to center and a little closer together and really listening and responding to that foil and the pitch to speed ratio that I want to maximize that upwind drive.
Yeah, not trying to force it too much. Not trying to make it climb harder than it has to or accelerate upwards. You're kind of letting it fly itself almost a bit on autopilot. You find that sweet spot and hang there. That also opens your hips up more, so you can angle the board and drive more upwind without pushing against it. In slowing the foil down, you can allow it to accelerate and fly, but also, you know, turn your hips a bit more. Whereas if your legs are way wider, you're kind of locked in.
And a lot of this, we won't get into all now, is how you position the wing and all of that as well. But I would encourage you to experiment with some of the stances that we're talking about. Because another thing I've also experimented with driving upwind is, instead of my feet being kind of angled, forward, I've attempted to be a little bit more perpendicular to board, just offset a little bit, and that creates a different feel with the foil too, and the path that you're projecting through the water, maybe less angle or of attack. To gain momentum, then to drive back up. Gain some momentum, drive back up. Anyway, it's just been fun to experiment with different foot placements to get different responses from your foil and speed.
Yeah, play with it, see what works with your body, because for me, a lot of times when I'm cruising and driving upwind, my feet are more pointed forwards like this. It just allows you to turn your hips more and chill. You don't need to push into it as hard. A lot of times that'll take some weight off your back foot, especially if you're in your strong stance, you've been ripping waves. Your back leg can get kind of tired, especially if you're pumping and all that as well. So bring that back foot forward, pointing it a little bit more forward, take some of that load off, allows you to twist upwind a little bit and keep a bit more of a neutral stance in your feet, rather than loading up your back leg all the time and twisting it into that kind of contorted, high torque type zone. So if you're finding your back foot gets sore, gets kind of twisted and feels a little funky after you override it a bit, give that a shot. When you're cruising, make it comfortable. If you're shredding, get into a stance where you have the control over the foil and you have that balance over the board. So.
And I think a key element to all this too, when you think about foot placement, is in how you're feeling with the wing too, and the position of the wing. And that could be another video we could talk about, position of the wing, back, forward. And that can dictate to your feet position, your width, and your stance, and how that all is. But I think the moral is kind of play around with it a little bit. If you've been stuck in your same spot, or you're a new rider, maybe this will help you think about, some key spots to mark on your board. So that way you can engage with it. And obviously, as you get into different conditions, as the wind increases, as the waves increase, the turbulence you have on the water, everything that we've talked about, a lot of seasoned riders will just intuitively make these adjustments. And so it's not like you're always locked in the same spot all the time for what you're doing. But I think it's good, even me, now that I'm 3 or 4 years into this sport, I'm still unlocking some of that stuff that I do intuitively. And now we're just trying to put some words and some instruction to it. You do need to do subtle adjustments, can really help as you become a better rider in different conditions and feel stable and locked in more.
It's good. Riding. Extend your ride time.
Hopefully
stress your body less, and just make everything a little easier. You learn to pull your feet together, get kind of in that stance, and now, gliding through attack all of a sudden becomes a little bit more natural, rather than being locked into this and trying to, force yourself upwind, and now you overfoil it because you're pushing too much pressure into your back foot, or like we said the other day, riding unnatural. Whatever you're doing in your natural stance, probably a little bit more intuitive. But if you're looking to go, make
weak
some
foot.
turns weak foot, and you're straddling the center line, it's probably not going to be as easy. You want to offset that stance just like you do on your strong stance. So that's something to be mindful of, and kind of make those mental notes, I think. And then as you transfer between boards, those things all start to click. Like, oh man, on that one foot, I like my feet a little wider, so maybe I shouldn't get such a narrow board. Oh, that one board, I noticed I'm having a hard time balancing on it. Well, what's the issue? Well, on my other board, I'm always at the front of the pad, but on this board, the sweet spot's back here, so you're always submarining the nose and purling it, and just knowing those mechanics can help you hone into changing conditions, new gear, new techniques faster. So
perfect. Well, I think we hit it quite well. We talk about knee placement, getting on the board, foot placement once they're up. Feel free to experiment with the real estate you have. Make some mental notes of where those different areas are, because that will help.
Big marker. Knees here, stupid.
Front foot, back foot, and all that. But hope you found this a little bit, if you've listened all the way to the end, something to kind of stretch your mind a little bit, think about your next session, about going out, where your feet are, experimenting with some of the things that we've talked about to see how that responds, how the foil responds, how your ride responds, how your board responds. Again, to make your session all that and more as you're on the water. So it's all about enjoying the stoke and having fun on the water. And
it is. And one thing I don't think we talked about really in depth yet, or didn't mention, and it's probably the most important part of this whole video, is guys coming off big boards, tons of stability. You can the sweet spot's this big.
Yep. We did talk about
Coming
that.
down into a smaller board, all of a sudden that sweet spot becomes a lot more important. So that's the biggest thing I always tell people sizing down in boards is, you know, take that thing for a swim, or realize, you know, that first session you're going to be kind of finding where that board likes to be handled from. When you do find it, look down, make a mental note, you know, where that is, and that's kind of where you want to be. And then also make that foil adjustment, right? Don't just throw it in and go, and that's how it is. You know, reassess. Okay, when I'm kneeling here and I'm planing up and I stand up and my feet are here, is that where my feet want to be with that foil
Is that
position?
the most efficient to get the board speed you need?
If it's not, yeah, usually where you're planing off on the board, you typically kind of want to be in that same stance for riding that board. Or if not, you need to know that and shift your stance as you come up onto foil. But I would argue that for most people, where the board wants to be ridden on top of the water is also the position you, for the most part, want to be foiling from. So you'll want to adjust your foil position to suit the board and where that sweet spot is and how that correlates with your stance when you're getting up.
Beautiful. And once you get to that level, you might be at the point of just wanting to put some front foot straps on, because those are reference points. I know I've talked to a lot of customers that they choose to put foot straps on their board for all of what we just talked about, because they know when they're switching feet.
But find the sweet spot first, because if you put the straps in the wrong position, you're not going to like it.
Right where they know where they are. So that could be a frame of reference, your foot straps and all that. Someone like myself who doesn't like to ride strapless, you know, looking at the pad, looking at things on the board, these are all things that I do as we talked about it subconsciously. I'll look down real quick, or I'll get feeling, and I kind of do this little subtle stuff. You know, those are all things, tips and tricks that help us to enjoy the stoke, enjoy the ride when we're on the water, man.
That's what we're here for.
That's what it's for. So anyways, been Jeff here at MACkite.
And Tucker.
Enjoy the stoke.
See you next time, guys.